I want to ask the three of you, so how do we do this? How do we come up with a response to these threats that also creates a paradigm of what being a Jewish people is in the 21st century? Ruth, you want to take the first stab at it?
Yeah, I must say that I'm very worried when I hear, which is of course true, that Jews should be very sensitive to anti-Semitism, which clearly they should be. They shouldn't deny its existence then and now. And this is supposed to be what is the thing that makes us feel that we want to work together. Because I feel that what is critical to the flourishing of the Jewish people is that Jews understand that it's valuable for them individually and collectively to continue to be Jews, to feel that the Jewish element in their identity is something that is very valuable to them, and that in order to accept this value and develop it, and most important, maybe transmit it, they choose a way of life in which the Jewish component of their identity is important. And of course, to do that, you need to have some kind of a hierarchy between your Jewish particularism and your civic kind of, it's not necessarily universalism, but your civic belonging to a state and the political community, Israel for some of us, the United States for others, and your feeling of being a person, a human being, someone who is constrained by human dignity and the equality of people as people. Religious people will say that this is man created in the image of God, and people who are less of believers will talk about the idea of human dignity as it is. And this combination of a complex identity of Judaism as a nation, religion, and humanity, and wanting to be just and to participate in tikkun olam, all of these together form our being. And we want to be not only individuals, we also have the need to belong, because part of the meaning of our life is being a participant of a culture, knowing from where we came and where we are going to. And I think this is what we try to do when we think of ourselves not only as humans, but also as Jews, Israeli Americans. And what we try to do today is not merely to identify dangers and find that because we have shared dangers, this is something that we need to do together. It's a very powerful force. But I think if we don't have a feeling that this particular form of life that we are trying to protect, to transmit, to maintain, is a value in its own way, then the mere fact that this is something that people fight against is not enough. So as far as I'm concerned, our most urgent challenge is to feel that what holds us together, what binds us together as Jews to one people, is the understanding that our being Jewish is something that we value and we feel is extremely valuable to us as individuals, to us as a group, as Jews, and as a mission of what we Jews have to say and give, and what we have said and given to humanity and the world at large. So I would like that what we feel should be our shared values is not the danger. Yes, we need the danger. Yes, we shouldn't, disregard it. It's extremely important. I believe that human rights are including a right to life, and the fact that Jews were murdered large scale in the Holocaust is only because they didn't have the power to protect themselves. So we've been discussing all these issues throughout the day, and it's very important. But now that we come to the conclusion and we want to look ahead, I think what we must do as Jews is to see, A, the value of human life, but B, if we want to insist that Jewish existence is of specific importance to us and possibly to the world at large, but to us as individuals and a community, then this is what we need to stress as our shared heritage. And I think that we have touched on some of these things. I think there are indeed great achievements. I think that the reason that we are all here today is that we feel that we and us are going to lose something very important if we don't have a way of expressing our Jewish identity. And I think the main challenge for the balance between Jewish form of life in Israel and in the United States or in the diaspora is this attempt, which is not at all trivial, neither for the religious nor for the non-Orthodox and non-believers and non-observant, to really understand what our Jewishness means to us and why it is important for us to maintain this component of our identity and to transmit it to others in a way that balances our commitment to Judaism, to the Jewish people, and to humanity at large.
Thank you. Thank you. Brett, do you think that a synthesis between the universal and the particular is possible for both the Jewish people and the world in this day and age?
I guess it depends on how you define synthesis. Is a marriage a synthesis? No, it's a conjoining of two distinct qualities that nonetheless can work in tandem. You know, Ruth spoke, I think, so eloquently, and that it's hard to add. I really feel like it's almost the last word. I would only add this, which is that Jews need to cultivate a quality of self-respect, and not just self-respect, but demand for respect, that is sometimes, I think, missing in a fair bit of Jewish discourse. And I do a lot of speaking at Jewish events all over the country for all kinds of utterly worthy causes. And there are two sorts of events at which I cringe. One is the video illustrating that such and such an organization has raised so many $1 million to pour so much concrete so that the children of Sderot can play securely and that they're always no more than 15 seconds from a bunker. Because that showcasing of Jewish victimization is precisely what Israel came into existence to end, not to sell itself to American Jews. The other thing I can't stand is the video in which the Jews have gone to Nepal because there's been a terrible earthquake, or Haiti, or wherever, and there they are, and they're doing something good. No, don't get me wrong. It's wonderful, okay? I love it. Jews are out there doing wonderful things for the world. But what I dislike about that is it's a bid to say, look at us, we're such do-gooding people, right?
Have to justify our
right. We're justifying ourselves. Look how lovable we are by all of this love that we're spreading as far as we can, and so forth and so on. And my objection to it, of course, is not the good work. The good work is wonderful. Okay? My objection to it is that it is an effort to get people to love us, right? Whereas I don't think that love is worth a damn. I think what we'd like is to get people to respect us. And that respect is based on something like a certain kind of insistence that we will not be defamed, we will not be defeated, we're not going to take crap from our enemies, and all the rest is, as the father said, all the rest is commentary. I was once in a debate with Peter Beinart, and it was one of these things, we're like twiddly D and dumb. I'm D. Sorry, Peter. the question was, what is it that you love the most about Israel? And, he said something about how fantastic, tikkun olam, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what I really love is foreign reports that Israel possesses an arsenal of about 120 nuclear weapons. That's what I love the most. Because whatever else, it is a giant don't you know with us, period. And it is based on an ethic of respect. And by the way, why is it that suddenly Israel is getting all this love from Saudi Arabia and Egypt and wherever? It isn't because Israel has made great, magnanimous concessions for taking risks for peace, which was the cliche of the 1990s. It's that the country has made it very clear that they're willing to stand by a certain set of interests, that they will defend them. They know what they're doing, and when the United States decides to, stare at its own navel for the next 10 to 15 years, the Israelis are going to stand up for themselves. That quality of respect is massively important. Look, all kinds of marriages begin with love, right? But if there's no respect at the center of the marriage, that marriage is going to collapse. So my message to Jews is start with respect. Maybe eventually you'll get to love, but that should be the basis.
So Yitz, speaking about respect. So Brad is talking about the need to demand respect from the outside world. What can we do to increase respect internally between the different factions of our people?
I'm going to slightly punt. I'll respond. I will respond, but I wanted to respond to this last exchange because I think it was a very important exchange. And I want to start by saying I hope we will get a chance before the end of the session to talk about the positive and the meaningful and the religious and vision of the Jewish people that I think makes it worth living as a Jew. So I shared that with Ruth, but in all honesty, I feel I have to first say, I hope this doesn't sound like pandering, but I first say that we have to first stop and listen and hear what Brett said. And I want to repeat almost my reaction at the end of the talk. I wanted to say, amen, and God bless you. And why? Because the truth is, and I think maybe this is part of the story of anti-Semitism. Because right now, all those visions and all those positive, and I've spent my life on it, and I would hope a chance to talk about some of it. But right now, the reality is that there's a real, clear, and present danger, including, again, which you said very powerfully, including that Israel faces not just mythical enemies, but very powerful and armed enemies who will literally have the potential for an existential and not just for a damaging attack on Israel. It's a real reality that the anti-Semitism has flared up both in America and in Israel. So I'm not saying this is why we should unite, we should get together, but one has to stop and face it and deal with it directly. And I want to suggest that perhaps the unspoken message, I'd like to add that connection to anti-Semitism. I think anti-Semitism in the end is about the fact that Jews are different. In other words, those who attack Jews as Bolsheviks, it's not all capitalists who attack Jews as Bolsheviks. Those who attack Jews as rapacious capitalists, it's not all the Bolsheviks or left. It's those who absolutize that particular viewpoint. It's Stalin who felt that I have created heaven on earth, and how dare you remain loyal or emotionally attached to the state of Israel as if there's something not perfect or complete here. So one of the major Jewish contributions to the world, and it's a continuing source of anti-Semitism, has been the statement that all human values and all good things have limits, and that limit, as great as it is, it's not everything, and therefore we continue to believe that we have an additional element, an additional teaching, an additional state, an additional reality to contribute, and we remain different. Now, the question therefore is, do we as Jews feel comfortable with that role? The temptation on the left to say the problem is the right is because you'd like to be completely at home on the left and not feel that somehow you are, not marching to the right drummer, and vice versa. On the right, there is this temptation to say I'm completely at home here, and I'm a good, loyal, whatever, and therefore I've got to project. So the question is, we as Jews, that's the question, do we have enough comfort to say, no, my contribution is to afflict the comforter, that within the left, because I'm left, to point out the limitations and the corrections and that needs to be done. If I'm on the right, to point out the overreaching and the dangers there and what can be corrected. And if we can get ourselves to do that comfortably, then we will not escape into this. The problem is the other side of the spectrum, but rather see in common together, as Brett tried very magnificently to point out, that there is a greater goal and there is a higher vision, but that it is not threatened by one particular interest. It has to deal with the entire range of the risks and the dangers out there, and it needs to be named and it needs to be confronted directly. So I just want to thank you for saying it that way and say, Frank, the challenge to all of us, not to escape it. Not to escape it for bad reasons, not to escape it for good reasons, like I'm too busy building the brilliant Jewish future to stop and deal with this right now. Right now, it's a major, immediate attention danger.
Thank you. And Ruth, you want to comment on that? And also, just want to ask you a different question. You said something that I personally fully agree with, which is, the positive motivation has to outweigh the negative. In other words, let's be Jewish because it gives us meaning and purpose, and not because people want to kill us for it. But how do you do that when different parts of the Jewish world define Judaism in very different ways? So how you create a consistent vision of that positive, meaning of being Jewish when we can't agree on it?
Well, I think this is the beauty of the theme of this conference. And I think that the dangers that you pointed out to, which are real dangers, are not only coming from external sources, the right and the left, that are non-Jewish, because I think we are very, very able in the sense that the same voices, the right-wing voices and the left-wing voices, are within us. So if we have a serious conversation within ourselves, which shares the idea that we are going to defend ourselves against external challenges and threats of extermination. But we are going to really listen very carefully to what we are saying to each other, rather than immediately dismiss them as traitors or as self-hating Jews or as this and that and the other. Because I think that most Jews, definitely the ones who come to conferences such as these, most Jews want to revive, strengthen, transmit, maintain their Jewish identity. If we don't have that, then we're in a very bad shape. But we do have that. And the people who argue about what Judaism is within the Jewish framework are people who are obviously interested in persuading the other side that they are right, and if possible, and if they can do it, they will want to do it. They want to have their power positions. They want to have their advantages, feeling right, or feeling realistic, or feeling more Jewish. But if they take seriously the fact that the other voices within the Jewish people are also Jewish, they're not giving up on their Jewishness. They are just claiming that their Jewishness is also of value. I think our ability to come to terms with the need, which is hard, to find ways of being committed to human rights and human dignity, but also accepting and vindicating and celebrating our wish to be different and to stand by and not intermarry and not lose our identity. If we manage to convince each other that our attempt to balance these two is not an attempt to either be only Jews and away with everyone else, or an attempt to be, not to be just nice Jews who really are doing the right thing for everyone, but we understand the meaning of wanting to be a distinct culture that takes some limitations and takes some things that are not colorblind. And the equality doesn't mean full integration. If we understand this and invest positively in the various ways of doing it, I think in the history of the Jewish people, in the past, throughout the ages, and in the recent modern times, including the miracles of Israel and Jewish revival all over the world, we are going to succeed in maintaining a diversity of human ways of life. And that's the way to go. And then we will have the power and the strength and the resources to expose and to deny the legitimacy of anti-Semitism, even if it hides itself as being something that is only against Zionism or only against this or that Jewish way, like communism at the time used to be a Jewish disease too. So we are not going to accept it. We are not that. We are people of an ancient heritage who paid extreme prices to remain Jews, who want to remain Jews, who find many sources of value in being and remaining Jewish. And we want first other Jews to respect our wish to remain Jews. And if we gain this respect, we will have the power to continue to exist to eternity.
Thank you. That was amazing. Brett, from your vantage point, what do you think could be sort of the cornerstones, the building blocks of an internal Jewish dialogue that goes to where Ruth is leading, right? To a renewed pride in being Jewish, to a unity in diversity. How do we build that? What can we lean on to build that?
I think it's important to understand at a level that goes beyond the question of Jewish practice or Jewish culture, what is unique about the Jewish people and its mission in the world. And as I think of it, Jews are the people who say no. And this is massively important for not only the advancement of human civilization, it's also extraordinarily important for the practice of liberal democracy. What do I mean by that? Every kind of community is formed by people who say yes. You want marriage? You say, I do, right? You want to join some organization, you accept, right? One thing or the other all the way up until citizenship, and that's all quite valuable. But when you think of all of the progress makers in human history, from Abraham to Rosa Parks, they were people who said, no, I don't accept this. I disagree. I dissent. All of you may think this, I think the other way. And that is inevitably a lonely, courageous, and profoundly unpopular act, which is why we are not living in caves. That's, if I had to boil it down to one thing, I think that is what the Jewish people have meant for the world. Now, I'm sure there are other people who have done this, but in a sense, uniquely, that has been a Jewish mission. And that's what makes us, in part, very obnoxious. To others, to each other. I mean, earlier I did this panel and some young man came up to me and within 2 minutes he got on my nerves. No, that's wrong. He got on my nerves in 30 seconds. He's probably in the audience now. And at first he got on my nerves and I thought, it's a group of Jews. Of course he's getting on my nerves. Good for him, right? And that refusal to pay deference to the guy on the stage with the pompous title, right? That, to me, is one of the essences of being Jewish. Now, the great challenge is, how do you create a community of no-sayers? Right? There is a kind of inherent contradiction in saying yes to the people who say no, right? And that's a tension that can never be fully finessed, right? It just can't, right? But you can at least try to maintain a certain kind of contradictory position in your head that you have to be able to do this. You have to have a certain acceptance of the fact that disputation, disagreement of one kind or another is going to be the basis of a richer conversation. And by the way, it's going to be the basis of a vibrant democracy, because we are not Americans because we always say yes to everything. We're Americans because, like the Jews, we also say no to things. And this gets back to your original point, the synthesis between Jewish particularism and this prospect, or this, whatever it is, of universalism. They are, in fact, synthesizable, because I think Jews are, in a sense, the democratic making element par excellence, because we are the minority. We are the people who create pluralism from the very beginning, because we are so frequently the dissenters. We force pluralism onto otherwise or frequently homogeneous societies. Why is America, what is one of America's great founding documents? It's Washington's letter, that beautiful letter to the congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, where he says, it's no longer merely toleration that we speak of. That's what made America, or that's what helped make America the kind of democracy we are. So I think this marriage, or the synthesis that we talked about, is real, and it's something that we uniquely have a capacity to advance.
Thank you. Thank you. Yitz, having heard your co-panelists and having been there throughout the day, how do we start building a common language for a common destiny? Easy question.
Let me say again, the common language will not be the common language of uniformity, that in the end, any hope of achieving this unity will reflect an acceptance, in fact, an affirmation that our arguments and our controversies are for the sake of heaven. You recall the famous Talmudic statement that controversies for the sake of heaven really have permanent and good outcomes. We can't avoid controversy, like a good marriage can't avoid fights. The real test becomes that the fight be a good fight, constructive, and that it not destroy and break down, and it leads to a greater respect and a greater understanding. So the first start is, again, to develop the language that in our arguments we try to understand and hear the other side, that in our arguments we try to give the benefit of the doubt and the benefit of the interpretation to the other side, without giving up and without denying what we stand for and our willingness to uphold it. So part of it is to generate a new language of controversy, discourse, or argument that truly increases respect in the end. The Talmud tells this wonderful story of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who always argued about everything, and then they ended up, unfortunately, tragically, at the end of their life, and really had a very vicious and destructive argument, and Reish Lakish then died, and the students come and the students try to learn and study with Rabbi Yochanan, and then he starts to cry and he says, you know, he said, I really miss Reish Lakish. He said, in the good old days when we were together all the time, any time I said something, he argued, he disagreed, he challenged me. I really grew out of it. You can come and tell me everything is fine, and what I've said is right, and it's all good. He said, I really miss him. I need him desperately, you know. You can't, so that has to be part of that part of a contribution. I add one more thing, because I was been trying to get to say it all day, really. I think without denying the focus on the danger and without denying the focus on this split or fear of a split with Israel and diaspora, I really think the big news or the central challenge of Jewish life is, in fact, that we're on the brink of a major flowering and a major transformation of the religion. I've argued this point before. We've had the biblical iteration of Judaism. We've had rabbinic Judaism, both of which took this amazing world vision and applied it into that particular culture. and really show Jews how to live and how to maintain those values and those purposes of life in each culture. And the first one that was more open, and the second one was more sheltered and more ghettoized. I think we're on the brink of a third one. And the third one of its defining challenges is that the world is much more open, much more interpenetrated. So the truth is that in order to maintain the Jewish distinctiveness, we're going to have to grow. Our ideas are going to have to be much broader. The universalism will have to be able to make room for the variety and the facticity of Jewish particularism, and vice versa. The particularism will have to grow. We have in Jewish communities still, and I say particularly in the religious sector, a kind of a narrowness and a kind of a rigidity and a kind of a failure to recognize the diversity of pluralism, the diversity of God and how we approach God. So we have a major job to broaden our own categories. We have a major job, and I would add one more thing, and I think it's probably the key to the future. And that key is, in the 18th century, Hasidism as a movement, we need an equivalent movement today in which, and this starts in the masses, doesn't just start with great leaders, in which we make that commitment that this is a moment of renewal, that we're prepared to take the responsibility of applying Judaism on a scale and with a multiplicity of objects and with a variety of people that we've never had before, and in the presence of many great cultures and great religions, which in the past we didn't take seriously because we tried to belittle them because they were antagonistic to us. That kind of growth, it means we're going to have to challenge ourselves to learn more, to root ourselves more, to deepen our Jewish roots and our Jewish understanding. And part of that really becomes to recover my sense of family and to say to the Jews of Israel, you can't dismiss me as you're not Jewish enough or you're not Jewish because I'm part of your family, you're part of mine. I'm not going away. I'm going to demand that you understand me and respond to me. And vice versa. So, I mean, this is the big challenge.
Thank you. And I found it's great that we start with danger. We're coming to the end, and we're talking about renewal, which is a good Jewish way of having a circle, a virtuous circle. I want to ask the three of you, starting with sorry? Yeah. So very briefly, because we have to finish. One word that you want to say about what people in the room can do to achieve this vision as they go back to their homes, to their communities, in 30 seconds or less.
I want to say one correction which is very important and maybe related to this question. We talked about particularism and universalism. This is a mistake. I don't know a single person who is just a person. You don't have that. We are all, we're talking about our Jewish component. This is particularism, all right. We are then also members of other particular communities. Israel is one, America, United States is another. But I don't know a single person who is only a citizen, and I don't know a single person who is only a member of a religion or an ethnos. We are all more than that. And the thing I think for each of us to do, I think this is a critical business, is to think seriously. I mean, we have multi-identities. What is the function in our life of each of our identities? Now, I find that it's not enough for me to be an Israeli citizen, very important, and it's not enough for me to just be a human being. I need the richness, the history, the special fabric of a relationship with a particular culture. I am proud of being a part of the particular Jewish culture, among other things, because it's so ancient and so impressive and so diverse. And I think what will strengthen what we need to do together is the understanding that if we accept the importance of the Jewish element as part of our identity and understand how we want to intertwine that one with the identity of other Jews as well as the other members of our identity groups, I think this is going to give us a sense of a peace and control over the hierarchy of our own decisions. And I think you may find how the Jewish element in your life is valuable to you and should be maintained.
Thank you. Brett, in 30 seconds or less, what can we do tomorrow morning?
2 things. Number 1, what she said. Number 2, let's eat.
Beautiful. Yitz, what can I do tomorrow morning after the red eye?
I just finished a book in which I argue that Judaism's main message is to choose life. And it's a religion that says that literally every act that you do, eating, breathing, talking, the next act that you do can be a choice of maximizing life, or can be a choice of degrading or declining the quality of life. And it really means, therefore, that in a sense you have to live, and you have to choose to live, and you have to embrace life sort of all the time in a very active and conscious way. I'm saying, I think what I would argue that go home and choose life, but in this sense, I mean choosing life is to really commit that I'm going to grow my own understanding so that I really can embrace the Israeli experience as part of my flesh and family, my family, and Israelis. And by the way, there's important research that shows this, that the Israelis embrace, they're not just Israelis, but they're Jews, and that they embrace the Jewish people as part and parcel, and they take responsibility for it. To grow ourselves to embrace our fellow Jews who we disagree with, and the fellow Jews who are living different lifestyles, in that we are in this together, and this is a mission that none of us can accomplish alone. Judaism alone can't accomplish it, let alone we as individual groups. If we make that kind of commitment and start working on it, you know, it's the famous story of Hillel. Standing on one foot, you start. And of course, all the rest, this commentary, all the rest is the rest of your life.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Yitz, Brett, and Ruth. We are, is that coming?
Hey, all right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ruth, Brett, Yitz, and Andres, let's give them all a hand. Thank you. Toda rabah.